Hello, listeners. I'm Shelley Devine. Welcome to my podcast of art, animals, and spirit. This is episode number 6, entitled Dark Year of the Soul. This is my true story of the year right before I had my awakening. 2019 was a rough year for me, and the things I experienced in that year led me to my awakening. But before the awakening, I was so miserable and suffered tremendously. In 2018, I had a series of health conditions. Some were bad, some were really bad. I broke my foot on Thanksgiving Day, and I had to wear one of those Franken boots. I had to have several rectal surgeries to fix a fistula. I started to have really bad episodes of vertigo. Then my body decided to totally freak out, and I started having seizures. I spent a full week in the hospital with wires and nodes attached to my head. We had a wildfire that caused us to evacuate for 5 days. This was the lilac fire. If you're in Southern California, Bonsall area, you will remember this. The fire burned all around our apartment, about 50 yards away, but our building was spared. It was also the year my best friend was diagnosed with stage 4 rectal cancer. It had not been a good year for me. During that time, my husband and I had 4 dogs, lived in a tiny apartment. Once the boys moved out of the big house we were living in, we decided to get a little inexpensive apartment to save money and to pay off some bills. After about 3 years of living there, we managed to reach our financial goal. With all the problems I was having, I felt a really strong desire to live somewhere where I could be closer to nature. I wanted to be able to put my feet on the earth and ground myself. The need for that was overpowering. I really don't know why I suddenly had the desire to be able to ground myself. I really never thought about it before. But with all the things going wrong with my body, I thought I needed to be closer to nature, perhaps to heal me. We finally decided it was time to move, not just for me, but for our dog Emma. Emma was a large Boxer Doberman cross. We lovingly called her a Boxerman. Sweetest dog in the universe. She was a very good apartment dog, but we wanted to give her a larger place to run and play. The other 3 dogs were Chihuahuas, and they were fine with apartment living. I had 4 horses that I was boarding at a stable, and I had to drive 30 minutes every time I went to go ride, which was pretty much every day. So my husband and I decided to look for a horse property so we could have the horses at home. We found the perfect place to rent on Miller Road in Valley Center. It had a large plot of land but no stalls. We would have to purchase and build our own stalls. When we went to look at the place for the first time, we didn't bring Emma. But the agent that showed us the place said we could come back and bring her to check it out. So we did, and she loved it. It was perfect for her and the horses and me. We signed the contract and planned to move in on December 1st. About 1 week prior to the move, my husband, Emma, and I drove to Arizona to look at a horse trailer. After experiencing the fire and evacuations, I told my husband we needed a 4-horse trailer. Our 2 little horses were broke. Our 2 little horse Ah, gotcha. Our little, I'll get this right, our little 2-horse trailer was broken down and could only carry 2 horses. We had 4. So we went to Arizona to look at a 4-horse trailer. Emma seemed a little down. She wasn't feeling well on the trip. I attributed it to the long drive. We packed up the house and prepared for our move on November 30th. I noticed Emma was really not looking well. I felt there was something wrong, so Paul and I took her to the vet. Sorry. We received bad news. She had stomach cancer. They kept her all day and gave her fluids, and we decided to make an appointment with a specialist. We were going to do everything we could to help her. When we left the vet that night, disaster struck. Emma died that night. It was so sudden and tragic. Paul and I were absolutely devastated. We were supposed to move to the new house the very next morning. It was the hardest thing to do, to pack up and move after the tragic night we had. I cried the whole day. When I was doing the final check of the apartment, I looked in every drawer, cupboard, and closet to make sure nothing was left behind. Paul and the boys, which were my son and my nephew, had already moved all the furniture while I stayed to clean the apartment. Then something amazing happened. I stuck my head into my closet for one last check, and I found a note stuck to the back of my closet door. It had a verse on it from the Bible. It was written in someone else's handwriting that I did not recognize. It was on a pink sticky note, and it read, "God can restore what is broken and change it into something amazing. All you need is faith." And that was Joel 2:25. This note was inside my closet. The closet that was used daily for 3 years that we lived in that apartment. And now on the final day we would ever be there, I find this note. How did it get there? I have no idea. My mind was blown. We never had guests in our tiny apartment that would go into the bedroom. The manager never came in. I never saw that handwriting before. I mean, seriously, how did it get there? To tell you the truth, it doesn't matter. And here's why. I was meant to see that note when I was meant to see it. It hit me hard. I was in full grieving misery. I was moving to a new house without my precious Emma. My heart was broken. That note couldn't have found me at a more perfect time. I needed that message. Even though 2018 was full of rough and tragic events, the following year is when it all hit me physically and mentally. I was grieving so hard for Emma while moving into our new rental. We went to Arizona to pick up the horse trailer we had purchased, and Emma's absence was weighing very heavy on us. We built our stalls and moved our horses home with us. I was really happy to have them home. As I cleaned the new house, which was disgustingly filthy, and unpacked our belongings, I felt like a zombie. I didn't feel alive. I was just going through the motions. I was forgetting everything. My memory was slipping, and it was pretty scary. I remember asking my doctor why I was forgetting everything, and I felt super weak and tired, and I really thought something was wrong with my brain. She simply stated, "You're grieving. That's what it does to you." I never thought about that. I never thought that my memory problems were related to losing my dog. I did my best to push through and get through each day, the best that I could. My husband was working all the time, and his commute was an hour or more. I was frustrated because I had to do all of the work. The main problem with that was my hip. That had been hurting me for many, many years, and it was getting worse. I was practically crippled and still had to feed and water the horses and clean stalls, which I loved to do. I've always loved to do that because it was like therapy to me. It was time for me to just think and just be with my horses. But it was really, really hard to do with such a bad injury that I had. I would sometimes balance on one leg because I was in so much pain. I also had full body pain that was worse than my normal fibromyalgia. At night, I would lay in bed and try to fall asleep through the electric shocks of pain in my hip. My body would also shake and vibrate so hard I was really scared I was going to have seizures again. In the morning, when I woke up, my hands would be swollen and hurt so much I could barely open them up, let alone carry something. My hands were starting to become as big a problem as my hip. I know this for certain. It sounds like a lot of complaining, but I'm trying to explain why I called that year the dark year of the soul. You've heard the dark night of the soul. Well, mine lasted a year. I literally felt like I was dying. I was extremely depressed, grieving, lonely, in so much pain that most people would crumble from. I felt like I was about to. I never wanted to hurt myself or die, but I really thought that I was dying. Deep down in my soul, my life was coming to an end. That's when I started to call out. I have always believed in God and prayed faithfully every night. I never believed, however, that spirit guides or angels existed. But I had had many unexplained things happen in my life since I was a kid. My mom believed in psychics and healers. She even took me to a metaphysical church many, many times. I didn't really believe in any of that woo-woo stuff. My mom was deep into it and pushed it onto me so much that I chose not to believe. I was a teenager and our relationship wasn't great. So, of course, I had to rebel. So I just straight up didn't believe her. But still, many unexplained things happened to me, and I was very psychic, even when I didn't believe it. So, in the desperate stage of my life I was in 2019, I felt it wouldn't hurt to see if there were any non-physical beings around me that could help me. So, I called out to them. And I called out to them every night. I would simply state, if there are guides or angels around me, can you please make yourself known to me? I didn't receive any answers, but I kept calling out to them. I knew there were spirits around. I have always believed in them. I have seen and felt them all my life. I had even felt some climb into bed and lay next to me many, many times in my life. But yet, I still brushed it off. I don't know why I didn't accept it. But during this dark year of the soul, it happened constantly. It happened so often, I just got used to it. For many years, there would be a smell of cigarette smoke that I would smell all of the sudden. I brushed it off to my boys or the neighbors smoking outside, and maybe it just drifted to me. When we were in the apartment in 2018, when I had all the bad stuff happen to me, the smoke scent would come around nightly. The boys were no longer living with us, Paul and I never smoked, so I blamed it on the neighbors. I would look out the window to see if anyone was standing outside my window smoking. Even though my windows were shut tight, there was never anybody there. I jokingly started talking out loud, thinking it could be a spirit. I called him Smokey. I would ask him to please take the smoke smell away because I couldn't stand it. I didn't really believe there was a spirit, but just in case there was, I would talk to him. In the back of my mind, I believed it to be someone's cigarette smoke that somehow floated to me from outside, possibly through the vents, who knows. But when we moved to the house with the horses, the smoke smell followed. We didn't have neighbors very close, but I supposed it was floating on air and traveled to me again. So I guess I was pretty open-minded about there being a spirit that follows me from house to house. And I felt my spirit friend, whoever it was, climb into bed and lay next to me. Why not believe in spirit guides if I believed that? My mom always talked about them. Angels were a little harder for me to believe in. I don't know why. They just didn't make sense to me. I wondered why they would exist, because God was almighty and omnipresent and omnipotent, and I called out to them anyway. I was in desperate need of help. I still didn't get any answers. Even if I did, I wasn't sure how I would receive them. I guessed I hoped for a name or a vision in a dream to answer me, but I got nothing. Just crickets. I did the best I could do and tried to make it through each day. I was angry, lonely, and constantly in pain. My hip hurt so bad, but I still did my chores with the stalls and fed. My hip had been hurting me for 12 years. Yes, I said 12 years. About 5 years prior to 2019, I had x-rays, MRIs, and bone scans that all showed there was nothing wrong with my hip. It was chalked up to good old fibromyalgia. Well, the good thing, even though the extreme pain made my life challenging, it never hurt when I was riding my horses. I was a horse trainer and riding instructor, so I was on horses all the time. I was very grateful that it did not hurt when I was riding. It only hurt when I got off and walked. Thank God for small miracles. When we were living in the house on Miller in 2019, we were very lucky to have our rental manager living right next door. She was a wonderful lady, and we got along splendidly. Her friends, and I would go trail riding on a regular basis. They were cowgirls riding in their Western saddles. And they were very kind, not to make fun of me, riding my very tall horse, Dusty, in my dressage saddle down the trail. I had so much fun trail riding with them when I was well enough. It wasn't until my hips started hurting while I was riding that I finally decided to have my doctor do more tests. I knew something was really wrong with my hip. It was not just fibromyalgia. Now the pain was stopping me from riding. That was the final straw. I made an appointment with my wonderful doctor and told her that we needed to pursue this hip situation. She fully agreed that we needed to get some MRIs, and so she set me up for them, and surprise, surprise, turns out that there was definitely something very wrong with my hip. The MRI results showed that I had 2 very large tears in the tissue that held my muscles to my hip bones. The tendons were actually tearing away from the bone. I also had a very large cyst in the same area. My doctor referred me to an orthopedic surgeon. He explained to me that not only did I have the tears and the cyst, but the ball of my hip, the ball and socket, well, the ball part was not fitting into the socket correctly. And I had a very tight muscle tendon that ran down the outside of the leg that was pulling things out of position. I was definitely going to need surgery. All we had to do was wait for the insurance to approve the surgery. I couldn't wait to be out of pain. Everyday life was excruciating. My doctor also had an MRI done of my hands due to the pain and swelling I was struggling with. The only thing they found was a cyst in one of my hands that really wasn't a problem. Before doing extensive blood work, after doing extensive blood work, my doctor saw that I had high rheumatic markers, which indicated that I could have lupus. She sent me to a rheumatologist for further testing. The rheumatologist diagnosed me with mixed connective tissue disease. That is what they name it when you have the symptoms and markers for 3 or 4 different diseases, but not enough of one to clarify exactly what it was. Sounds confusing? Because it is. I basically have parts of lupus, scleroderma, polymyositis, and Jorgen's syndrome. Yay me! Luckily, the medications she put me on helped tremendously. So in all the misery, I've been talking too long, you can tell. I carried on, still feeling like I was dying, but at least finally I had a diagnosis and a medication. My husband was at work and I didn't have any help. One day, a house just a block away from us caught fire and we had to evacuate. Here we go. This is why I insisted that we got a 4-horse trailer if we were going to move to Valley Center. I was alone. I had to hook up the giant trailer and load 4 horses, 4 dogs, and 2 birds and drive off. Thankfully, my friend, neighbor, who was my real estate gal, called up one of her friends to come help me because she knew about my hip and that I was alone. A wonderful lady showed up out of nowhere and helped me evacuate. It turned out that I knew her. I had leased a horse from her to use as a lesson horse a few years prior. I was very, very lucky to have friends and neighbors like that. Well, this has been quite a story. And of course, there's more to come. But for now, I'm going to say goodbye to my wonderful listeners. And I invite you to share your experiences with me. If you would like for me to share your story on my podcast, you can email me at art.animals.spirit@gmail.com. And if you would like a reading from me, you can go to my website, infinitesoulreadings.com. I look forward to hearing from you. And until next time, stay open to whispers of spirit. Trust those subtle nudges. And remember, your intuition is your superpower. Next episode will be the continuation of this story. See you then.